lot of hosts think that dynamic pricing tools like PriceLabs are set and forget. But if you're using it correctly, you actually should have dates on your calendar that are unbooked and that you would have to go in and do manual adjustments for. Let me show you what I'm talking about. And before we even start, let me just tell you that these are adaptations of the free content that's posted on Sean Rocketzich's YouTube. He's a really big influencer in this space. He's taught me at least 90% of the things that I know and implement today about short-term rentals in general have come from him and his free content. So make sure to check him out if you are interested in more in-depth analysis and all things Airbnb. So let's get started. So PriceLabs and dynamic pricing in general, right? So it's meant to account for fluctuations in the market demand. There's naturally going to be dates that people pay more for or less for, and it's just a really good tool to, not make you have to manually price things, right? But if you're using it effectively, right, you actually should have dates in your calendar that are unbooked, and you should actually have to manually price. So generally, if you're setting and forgetting dynamic pricing softwares, right, and it's 100% booked or 90% booked, you're probably set too low, right? So your rates or your base price or whatever the manipulations that are being made are probably too low if you're getting booked that much. I would say that you should probably shoot for like 60 to 70% occupied just with dynamic pricing, right? Just naturally. So 60 to 70% of your calendar should be filled just with dynamic pricing or dynamically priced stays, the things that you didn't have to manipulate. Of course, there are like specific settings that you could manipulate within PriceLabs, and very specific things that you probably should mess with before you start, like when you initially set it up. That'll probably affect that, but generally I think that 60 to 70% is a good benchmark. And y'all, this is correct because if you're being booked 60, 70% of the time, right, that probably means that you're priced pretty effectively. You can say that, if the average market occupancy is 50%, you implement dynamic pricing, maybe it goes up another 20%. That seems to me, that seems normal, that seems natural, even without like any crazy effort put into it. So to me, it means that assuming you're doing things right, like you're doing things right from the start. So, just things generally that we talk about, how to operate short-term rentals, how to furnish, how to price, how to take pictures, how to, have good customer service. Like those are all my assumptions going into this, that like you have a good foundation in all of these things, and that has led you to 60, 70%, right, by implementing all of these tools. So assuming that's all correct, and we're starting at the same point, if you're 60 to 70% occupied using dynamic pricing, you're probably priced competitively, right? Like you're one of the better options in the market. You are pricing competitively where people are willing to pay more in the future for your stays. People, you have a good lead time, et cetera, right? Or that your dynamic pricing is accounting for lead time, right? So generally you're pretty successful. But something that Sean talks about, he kind of has a benchmark where if whatever days are unbooked within like 30 days, so if today is October 8th, whatever days are unbooked from now till November 8th in your calendar, your dynamic pricing has failed in some way, right? And that's just to say that, I guess it's just to say that it's failed. So not that it's not a good tool or it doesn't work or it's not effective, it's just that for those specific days, the dynamic pricing was not effective for. And Sean also teaches about like rule sets, right? Like I do a lot of manual manipulations in the calendar where you incentivize bookings for specific days and lengths of time at certain rates by giving discounts, right? So he's a very big proponent of that. I use that a lot. So within my Airbnb calendar, there will be rule sets that are colored onto the calendar that would naturally already kind of, incentivize a booking, right? Before we get to that point, before I even have to manually adjust. But so if both of those things fail, then we go to manually price adjusting. And in a perfect world, if you could just do this on Airbnb, but at least for my size operations, and I think for other short-term rental operators that have more than one property, you're likely using like specific tools that kind of organize things, like people use Guesty, hospital, property management softwares. If you're using PriceLabs, you probably have a few listings, right? You're automating messaging. You have a lot of different softwares that are working together, right? And when they integrate with across all these channels, you can't manually do price like you can't manually set prices within Airbnb if that's what you're specifically on. or even like other channel managers, even if you had Guesty or you have Hospitable, that links all of these listings together, you cannot manually adjust them through that platform because PriceLabs is kind of like the king of that hierarchy. So whatever prices come out of PriceLabs is what's populated to the rest of the listings, and your manual adjustments won't stay since they refresh every 24 hours. Okay, so what do we do when the price fails, when your dynamic pricing software fails? We manually adjust, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. Okay, y'all, so here we are in PriceLabs, right? So this is something that I implemented the other day. Initially, I had created rule sets within Airbnb that would mimic a 5% like discount schedule. So something that Sean has spoke about, something that I utilize generally is like when you first start setting up your base price in PriceLabs, say it's $100. If you're not getting to that 60, 70%, target occupancy, naturally, you're probably priced too high, right? So you would essentially, he calls it price discovery. So you would just lower that base price by 5%, which I assume is just an arbitrary number. It's not too big or too small to, decrease by a rate that would be too large where you are too low, or, I think you're just controlling for that, right? So I use that same kind of ideology, right? So within PriceLabs, since PriceLabs is generally the king of the hierarchy across all these property management softwares and channels generally, you can just go in there and make manual adjustments, right? So I went a little bit further in the future just because I have like there's a lot of stuff on the screen down here that kind of might be confusing. So maybe it'd be easier if I actually show this manually. So whatever. So this is my calendar currently. Like you see, we have these grayed out dates are some bookings. So before you get to the day, which is Wednesday the 8th, you generally would already have bookings. So your calendar is going to look like this. We have like a longer booking. This is kissing me. So there's people stay for longer dates. Other stuff riddled through here. There's a big game day weekend next week. I think it is already. I guess a week and a half. That's coming up. So there's some bookings there. And if you look like into the future, there's still bookings here, whatever. Have some longer that you're kind of walking up into, stuff just riddled throughout. So what I'm trying to emphasize is like within 30 days, the days that are not booked, you have failed in some way, right? The dynamic pricing has failed. So whether it's because you set the price too low, or set it too high, or whatever settings you messed with didn't work, it hasn't worked. So this is what you do. Or this is what I do to fix this. So I just come in here. First, let's establish a time frame. Maybe that'll be easier. So for this one at the top, the Cozy Getaway. So this is like a studio attached to my home, right? So it's very small. So naturally, the lead time for people are less, and lead time is just the time in between when the person booked and when they check in. So generally, for smaller spaces, it's going to be less, right? Less time, more last-minute bookings for these smaller places. So for me, within 21 days is when I start to kind of mess with the price, right? So if you see here, Wednesday the 8th, 21 days is the 29th. So up until the 29th, which I'll have to do this as well. So I guess I'll give an example. I would manipulate the price. So this day is unbooked. PriceLabs has failed. So we copy a discount schedule, right? Which would mimic me decreasing the rate from its original rate 5% each day. So maybe that's a little bit confusing. So let me show you a little example that I have, which I'll also share this at the bottom of the video. So it's a compounding schedule. So this is a nice little document. I'll share this. It'll be very easy. So, but basically we're just illustrating this. That like, okay, so for the 29th day, or for the 21st day, sorry, which is the 29th, it's unbooked. So within this time period, we have recognized that this price has failed. So this would be the first day of me discounting this. So like I said, 5% just an arbitrary number. I just use it I just use it. It's an arbitrary number. So within PriceLabs, you can actually click on this day. You could do % change on a recommended price, and then you just put in -5% and add, and then boom. This will go down. If you see here, it has a price that's 73%, and then I will have to refresh it, I guess. Okay, and here you see, so it's 5%. So whatever the price was customized, the original price was $71. Then you see right underneath it says that date override listing -5%. So now we're down 5% to 68 to manually adjust for that. Okay, y'all, and I had to remind myself why the heck I actually did this because I was confusing myself. So basically, I do a compounding discount, right? Because, for example, I already implement like last minute pricing within that same time frame. So generally on PriceLabs, you have the customization to do last minute pricing. So within 30 days, I would be giving discounts for last minute. So that kind of controls for these like 5% decreases naturally, but still, for example, this smaller one. So within 30 days, I'm starting my last minute pricing. And then within 21 days, I'm getting even more aggressive, right? Because to me, that's even more unnatural. So I do a compounding discount schedule because as we get closer to the date, the pricing software is going to do last minute discounts. And then if I'm also doing 5% discounts, as you get down the days, so instead of doing 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, I kind of do steps like I could show you here, right? So like instead of day 10 being 50%, it's 40%. And that's just to control for how the pricing software is going to also be discounting. Okay, y'all, and this is day 2. As you could see, since yesterday, we actually did get a booking from these manual price adjustments, right? So we got from Saturday to Wednesday the 5th. So these are working in real time, just so we know. But I'm also going to re-record this because I did a terrible job of explaining this discounting schedule. So basically my idea with compounding discounts was, one, like I said previously, is that I'm already making percentage-based decreases on the price within a certain time frame already. So by compounding it, it gives a little bit less of a discount. Like I was saying, instead of at day 10, it would be 50, it's at 40, right? Because it's, going down in littler steps. And that's to say that it is going off a percentage off the original price, but original, I mean the previous one. Like, so like on this page, for example, from 100 to 95 is 5%. That's the first day, right? So the original price is 100. So day 2 of discounting, the original price is now 95. Because my assumption was that, okay, if the first day I do 5% off the first price, we get to 95. Then if another day passes, 95 still isn't working, and I still want to use that 5% arbitrary number to decrease by. So 5% less from 95, or 5%, or whatever, 95% of $95 is 90.25. So those are the 2 reasons that I did a compounding discount schedule. And y'all, just so we're crystal clear on how I did this, I'm just going to redo this because I tend to ramble and probably am very confusing. So just going to get rid of this. So basically, 4 days ago, I looked at my calendar and I said, okay, these dates aren't booked within that 21-day threshold. So whatever, it's just what was 4 days ago, the 4th. So 21 days was the 25th, which we can see on the calendar is right here. So whatever, these dates I manually priced, so it's a little bit different. I had to be a little bit more aggressive, but I guess we can just do this. We'll just do it for the sake of the video here. So just gonna get rid of that stuff, even though that probably is terrible. Yeah, okay, anyway, so whatever, 4 days ago, I looked at my calendar, it's unbooked. These dates are unbooked within that 21-day threshold that we've established, just because that's what I feel within that amount of time the calendar has failed, just based on my experience, right? So whatever. So it was the 4th, today's the 8th, and it's booked, which is cool. So whatever. This is still within the threshold. So 4 days ago, I did this. I went from here, and I went to 21 days in the future, which is the 25th. And I did this to the 25th, and I did the percent change recommended price. I did negative 5%. So boom, we did that, right? So then another day passed. So still was unbooked. So I went back in here and I did this, negative 10%, right? Basically following the schedule. I either I round up or round down. It's kind of arbitrary, right? Like for these numbers, I've kind of, if it's like 98, if it's like really super high up there, I will round up. But other than that, I'm more prone to round down just to be a little bit more conservative, but whatever. So the second day of discounting, we do 10%. So now since technically today would be the 5th of October, the 21-day threshold would be the 26th now. So now the 26th is within my threshold. it's not booked, so it would technically be the first day we're discounting it. So we'd go in here, percent change recommended price, -5%. Boom. All right. So now, next day passed. It's now the 6th. So again, these days are unbooked. So third day of discounting. Start from left to right. 14% change in recommended price. This day still unbooked. We go -10% now. And now today is the 26th, and is the 6th, Monday the 6th, and 21 days would be the 27th. So now technically this would be the first day that we're discounting. So we'll do -5%, and so on and so forth. So then to get where we were before, another day passed. It would be the 7th. So again, unbooked, left to right. We are manipulating this price now -18%, just following this schedule, right? We would be here 18.55. I just rounded down. Left to right, here we go. So now this still unbooked. We go up to day 3, 14%, which follows this, right? Now we're going to 10% here, right? And now again, so since today would be Tuesday the 7th, 21 days, which is our established threshold, would be to the 28th. Still unbooked, so technically would be the first day of us discounting. -5%. So, and then finally we would get to today. So today is October 8th. So again, these days are still unbooked. So now we would go to the next one, which I haven't done. So we'll do 22%, right? So left to right, 22%. Goes all the updates, goes down the road, 18%. Now we're at 14%. Now we're at 10%. And again, so since today's the 8th, we're within our 21 day threshold. 21 days would now be the 29th. 29th is not booked, so we can assume that the dynamic pricing has failed, and we will then add manual pricing adjustments to make sure those days get booked, right? So again, you click the date, percent change recommended price. It's the first day we're discounting it manually, and we add, right? And then we could kind of just like save and refresh. And you see we have all these prices updated. Okay, and that's basically it. So sorry if that was a little bit confusing. Basically, my point is that dynamic pricing is good. It's a good tool. If you use it correctly, it should fail. You should have gaps in your calendar, and you'll have to go in and manually adjust, right? So this is how you do that. This is how you easily integrate this within like your property management softwares. If you just have one listing and you're using PriceLabs, is a way to very easily implement this. If you don't use any software like this, you could also very easily do this just by making rule sets in Airbnb, or just taking your calculator and following that schedule and just discounting the one day 5%, the next day 10%, yada yada yada. So yeah, the actual idea is not overly complicated. Just when you're utilizing dynamic pricing softwares, if you're using it correctly, it'll fail. You'll have to go in and manually adjust to get those dates booked. And yeah, that's how you do it. So hopefully that wasn't overly complicated. Maybe in practice it's a little more complicated just because I'm not explaining it very well. Yeah, so let me know. So I'd be more than willing to answer any questions if something was confusing. I'm gonna add the discount schedule, like that little Google Doc, just so you don't have to ask ChatGPT, or it would just be easier for you. And yeah, this is just my thought. This is what I've been implementing. I've started implementing this within very recently. I kind of just make content as I come up with stuff and whatever I'm working on and applying. So actually in the middle of that video, I actually changed things up. But yeah, generally the 5% arbitrary number should manually adjust your prices within a certain threshold. It's specific to your market, specific to your intuition, and kind of like how the size of the listing, how it usually performs, what's the lead time, etc. So we can make videos on that in the future if that's something that people are confused about. But yeah, so that's it. Hope you found this useful. See you.